Will India be able to enter the list of world's top arms exporters? Let's take a look. India's defense exports clocked an all-time high of 16,000 crore in the last fiscal, which is an over 10 times rise since 2016-17. What does this achievement mean, and is the 35,000 crore target achievable? Breaking down India's defense export strategy and the road ahead for us is Professor Harsh V Pant of Observer Research Foundation. Welcome to TOI Business Bytes, Professor Pant. So basically, we are discussing India's exports growth in the last few years. And in that context, I'd like to understand from you that this record figure in the last fiscal, what does this achievement mean in terms of the trends in the last few years?
First of all, Smriti, it means that we are on the right track. That for a very long time, this has been a problem area in India's defense policy. We have been trying to rectify it without much success. But I think finally we are getting somewhere. And I think that's something to be optimistic about, the fact that we can deliver on this count, and the fact that I think our defense industrial establishment is today part of a journey that will take India from being a net importer to being a net exporter, is something I think that one has to cherish, because again, we have talked a lot about it, but very, very, results have been very, very meager. So I think that we are on the right trajectory is something that has to be appreciated, but much more work needs to be done, as you well know.
Right. But, in terms of policy initiatives, what do you think has helped in this 10 times increase from 2016-17?
See, India faces this peculiar problem that we are, of course, we have a very live border with Pakistan and with China now. So there is a two-front challenge. We have Chinese tire machinery arrayed against us. And it is a very qualitatively and quantitatively superior military. So as we move towards defense modernization, we also have to keep those operational requirements in mind. And at the same time, this emphasis on self-reliance, on Atmanirbharta, on creating defense manufacturing base in India, often you will see that they run in opposite direction. If you have a problem at the border, if you have adversaries arrayed against you, you would want to buy as much as possible on maintaining that balance. But in this case, I think we have tried to do both. And in the process, what has happened is that our defense procurement policies, as they've evolved over a period of time, have allowed for the greater indigenization of our processes, of our equipment. And I think this idea of having positive indigenization lists has really helped, because now there are certain things for which Indian military will have to rely on domestic manufacturers. And foreign firms have been prohibited from entering into that fray. And that has made it very important for the military and the defense industrial establishment to have a dialogue which is productive. Because at the end of the day, the government is giving a very clear message that they are not interested in importing some of the things that perhaps can be manufactured in India. So both sides have to work towards it. The Indian defense manufacturing base, the Indian defense manufacturing has to live up to the military's expectations, and military has to also start pushing in that direction, where the easier option existed in the past of going abroad and buying from the shelf. Today, that option no longer exists. So I think consistently, the defense procurement policy has moved in a particular direction of indigenization, and we have had these positive indigenization lists that have allowed India or Indian military to galvanize the defense manufacturing base domestically as well.
Okay, but from going from 16,000 crore to a target of 35,000 crore by FY25 for defense exports, do you think that's achievable, and what more really needs to be done on the policy front for that?
Well, as you can see, the numbers are huge, and it's a very huge jump. Right. But I think even the fact that we have risen, for example, 24% or around that in the last 6 or 7 years, that is also a very significant shift, given where we were a few years back. So I think nothing is impossible. But certainly, if you look at how the kind of year-on-year trend lines that you will have to achieve, I think around 120% growth will have to be needed a year-on-year basis to achieve the target of 35,000 crores. So it's a huge task, certainly. But I think what perhaps is helping India is the new shift in the global order, where technology sharing is now becoming the norm with India. You have major partners. We have had a very successful visit, like Prime Minister Modi's visit to the US, where this technology sharing, especially in defense, was a major part of that outreach. So I think as Western governments become more comfortable in sharing technology, and as we become more comfortable in absorbing that technology, I think the target can be achieved. But certainly, I think India needs to be very clear in terms of what it needs for its operational requirements, for which that dependence abroad will be something that India will have to rely on. But at the same time, which areas are there on which India wants to build domestic capacity, that is something that India will have to, again, make it very clear to itself, to its stakeholders domestically, as well as to the rest of the world, that certain areas in which India wants to work, we need to move much beyond technology sharing towards co-production, co-development. And certain areas where you want to develop domestic manufacturing, you have to start absorbing those technologies, and you have to start building and enhancing the defense manufacturing base to a level where that India can attain that attractiveness of an exporter that perhaps still India does not have. So I think focusing on a few weapon systems, focusing on a few niche middle and high-end weapon systems perhaps will help. We have talked about BrahMos or Pinak or even Tejas, for example, where there is a lot of interest abroad. So I think branding and selling those weapon systems perhaps will also be needed to be done at a much higher level than we are doing what we are doing today.
Okay, but India is actually one of the largest, it is the largest importer of arms in the world, and even in the export list, it doesn't feature in the top 25 countries. Do you see that mix changing in the coming years?
I think if the present trend lines continue, certainly it can change. But as I said, we face this conundrum that we have to continue to operate in an environment which is very, very tenuous, which is very dangerous, where our adversaries, for example, are arming to the teeth, and in particular China. China is not simply, it's not any other South Asian country in the context of Pakistan. China is a global power with global ambitions, and the kind of cutting-edge defense manufacturing base that it has created over the last few decades makes it very challenging for India not to maintain adequate deterrence. And that means that we will have to keep on buying, we'll have to keep on importing weapons for the foreseeable future, unless we are at a level where we can be completely self-reliant. And that certainly is not in the offing anytime soon.
But you're also saying that, at the end of the day, it's okay if we continue to import a lot as long as we are moving in the right direction for exports.
Absolutely. Because I think that's the model that every country that eventually became a defense exporter, every top 5, top 10 countries in the list that you were talking about, all those countries have had a very fluid environment where they have had both import and exports being continuously looked at. And in this particular case, in the Indian context, of course, we have a very, very significant threat perception, which many perhaps countries, even when they were developing their defense manufacturing base, did not face. So we are trying to do something in very adverse situations in this context. But I think the positive news is that a large part of the world today sees India as a partner, even in technology sharing and defense, and that's good news for India. So when the Prime Minister goes to US, he's doing talking about technology sharing, and we have seen a lot of deals coming out of it. When Prime Minister will go to France this month, again, defense will be a big part of discussion, and we have had great relationship with France, and we are looking forward towards co-production and co-development. The challenge, I think, comes from Russia, where Russia has been a traditional defense partner. Now what is happening in Russia has opened up a number of questions about the future of Russia as a defense power, as a country that can continue to supply India with weapon systems. And of course, we should remember that we are also co-producing and co-manufacturing, like BrahMos, for example, with Russia. So what happens to that trajectory? I think those questions are very serious for India and for a partner like Russia. But beyond that, I think it looks very good at the moment.
Okay, but in terms of, what does the geopolitical analysis suggest in terms of the type of arms that India is exporting and the countries it is exporting to?
See, I think at the moment where we are largely exporting to is in the aerospace sector. where whether we talk of fuselage and other components, that is something that India has been trying to export. There has already been a lot of interest being expressed for our for some of our products like BrahMos or Pinak or Tejas. But going forward, we will have to identify where we want to put the focus on, and
Right.
that focus will perhaps define our relationships as well. Defense relationships by definition are strategic in nature.
Right.
So therefore, strategic partnerships and how do we want to use those partnerships towards what end will also define where we would be exporting, how would we export, how we would be exporting, and what we would be exporting. So I think ultimately the broader issues of our future of defense policy and national security policy will be a very important determinant of where India is selling and what it is selling. But at the moment, certainly the India's aim would be to expand the presence that it has at the lower end of the spectrum and keep on focusing on as it moves towards the higher end, towards some niche products.